Hi, and welcome to the Prompted Mind podcast. This is my corner on the internet where I talk about all things AI. What's new, what's next, what's trending. And today we are gonna flip the script a bit because I don't know about you guys, but for me, November was a tough month, a hard AI pill to swallow because there was so much going on. Even I had problems to focus on what was the most important news. Because we are hearing investments, we are hearing stock market, we are hearing AGI, we are hearing companies, data centers in space. So many things and so many questions also, especially about the financial backbone of artificial intelligence. Because are these seven companies running the entire American economy? Like, there is so much going on. And I was looking for answers. And sometimes you have to do things differently. And I had so many questions and I needed those answers. So, what's best then? Ask the experts in the field. So, I am out on the hunt for AI experts who can tell us exactly what is going on in a language we can actually understand. And today I am joined by Giorgio Torre. He is one of the AI top voices and AI leaders in the field. He has done a lot of AI work for governments in the Middle East, but also in Europe. And on LinkedIn, he is one big AI leader because 170,000 professionals are following his work every day. And his articles reached over 50 million views. So I know this man is capable of explaining those things to us in a way that we can also understand it because while there is so much going on in Silicon Valley and with all these AI companies, it also affects our daily lives. And if you are not tech savvy, if you're not well informed in the AI world, you're sometimes missing out on what is happening here actually and what we are going towards. So let's dive right in. Hopefully, we can get some answers. So, Giorgio, first of all, welcome. It's an honor to have you here. And let's just start with the first question. I hear all of these influencers, investors, fintech gurus, everyone shouting that we are in a certain AI bubble. But most people don't have any idea what that means. So, can you explain exactly what we are calling this AI bubble?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sandra, for having me out. AI bubble is just the name that journalists at Wall Street have given to the ongoing fear and I would say concerns over some investors over the debt-funded AI investments. The investments are mainly on LLMs, compute, massive data centers, and energy, obviously, to power them. There has been also an incredible amount of disinformation by social media content creators, YouTubers, and digital people, tech-savvy people, which partially fueled the previous weeks of hysterical fear on SP 500. Like in the past weeks, has been quite tough for investors. Now, before deciding we are in a bubble or not, let's first define what a bubble is, right? So, looking at the history, the most fitting definition is this: a market phenomenon characterized by a rapid escalation or increase of asset prices beyond their intrinsic value, or the value that we all agree it's for that asset value. And this is driven by speculative mechanisms and investor psychology, meaning the hysteria of people that believe and attribute value in some commodity or asset drives those prices up. So it's purely demand. This is the most general and basic definition of a bubble. Now, the mistake committed by many is to stop at this definition and believe that this is enough to explain what's going on in Taiwan, Beijing, Abu Dhabi, and in the Silicon Valley. So why are some investors then, if obviously this definition does not fully fit, are still concerned about the economics of AI? And I think there are, you see, Sandra, at least four main reasons. The first one is obviously a high degree of concentration. 80% of gains are, I would say, concentrated within the big techs or the so-called Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven. Number two, an extreme level of interconnectedness of revenue among the main AI companies, which means that some companies invest in each other, buy from each other, or there was this incredible story of NVIDIA selling GPUs on lent money from startups and so on. And then there was also revenues produced on a I think this is the biggest concern, which might concern even investors, which has to do with revenues. Revenues produced are a smaller fraction of the amount invested, and those type of concerns are usually from value type of investors, like Warren Buffett. And this means that break-evens gets lower, which means, in very simple terms, that companies are investing more than they actually make. So let's say that if I'm getting paid $10 for a specific, I don't know, pack of oranges, like a box of oranges, I get paid 10, but I reinvest $10,000 for, I don't know, 100 trees planted in oranges. There is something that does not work in the math, right? And finally, there is also a more type of financial concern, which is the fact that SP 500 P ratio is at 30. Now, what does this mean in simple terms? It means that the stocks within Wall Street tech compart are traded 10 times more than natural price. So going back to the example of the oranges, instead of paying $1 or €1 or 1 or 10 reals per orange, I now pay 300 per orange. And obviously in real economics, sounds scary, but in financial markets, sometimes it makes sense until it doesn't. While those are certainly source of risk, obviously, and I can understand those concerns, AI is not yet a bubble, I believe, or at least is not in the canonical terms, in canonical sense. And if it's a bubble, it's purely industrial and rational, not a financial one. So why do I say this? Because outside of the AI-linked names, the market as a whole has done relatively poorly. So AI today, just as a number, represents only the 4% of the US GDP, but he accounts for 92% of GDP's growth on the first part of 2025. So we're seeing that almost all the growth of the US comes from a tiny fraction of its GDP. So with without AI investments, GDP growth would have been 0 to 1% across all the year, while most probably would be 3.5, so something about 35 times bigger. Also, another important reason, and I don't want to be boring on the econometrics part, but this is quite important, especially for those who mention the fact that there is a bubble. The bubbles do not really pop until they are popped by tightness of monetary policy. We are going to be more likely to ease or to see an ease of interest rates from the Fed rather than to tighten them. In fact, the Fed's chair, Jerome Powell, had quite an interesting exchange with Donald Trump, and will likely need to slice rates under Trump's pressure itself. So, which means that every bubble pops up when there is less money in circulation. When the central bank of the US decides to erogate less money, inject less capital into the economy, those bubbles, whatever nature they are, tends to pop. This is not the case because we are going toward the opposite direction. But I think the most convincing idea of the fact of why this is not a bubble is, as usual, history. The Latins used to say, Historia magistre vitae, so history is the master of life, but we can apply also in economics most of the time. And I can mention 4 main examples of what a bubble is, because we still don't know if this is a bubble. But let me tell you what for sure a bubble was. I would start from your home country, Sandra. This happened in Netherlands, the home of not only the highest concentration of bicycles and places where you can ride, but also of the world's first stock exchange market. We're talking about in the 60, if I'm not mistaken, 60-20s, early 60-20s. But from there started the tulip mania, or the tulip, what I call the tulip bubble. It was in the late 30s of the 17th century. So what happened is that to inflate the price of those commodities, those were luxury goods at the time, were not available for everyone. Is probably what today we can consider Van Cleef's type of jewelry, or I don't know, Pandora, whatever. I'm not an expert. I might say something profane here. So scarcity as a brand was labeled to inflate the prices. So it was like, okay, guys, there are very few pieces remaining. You need to buy. The last ones are at this price. Just like if you remember the NFTs, this no-sense pictures of monkeys, and people were pouring millions in those things. So the speculative frenzy was what drove this bubble, and the fact is that the prices collapsed by 99%. Now, what happened here? Once the price were inflated, an entire economy was built around that, because with more capital came more people, more jobs, and more infrastructure built around that. And in a couple of months or maybe years, people stopped to buy tulips because they generally were too expensive. They could cost 10 times. One single group of tulips could be shipped for a cost that was 10 times a skilled work annual income. So that's a crazy reference. And when people stopped to buy that, obviously the entire economy collapsed with it, because it was objectively a bubble. So the irrationality of people drove that. Second example, 1929, a little bit closer to us, the stock market crash. This is probably the most famous and commercially available, because here there was an over leverage. So we are coming from the roaring 20s, the industrialization. We are toward the end of the industrial revolution. So we got, I think, the radio, automobiles. We have new technologies within the production of aluminum and steel and so on. And so all those goods, end users' goods, become cheap. And as a result, people are told in banks, hey, why are you depositing this money here? You know what? Instead of depositing here, you can reinvest. But many people were, how can I say, afraid of the risk associated. After all, they had no experience. Few economical conditions caused the stock market to fall. And with the fall of the stock market, the panic started. And this panic created a domino effect on banks, because remember, banks were the ones who lent money to the investors to open those positions. So the fall of Wall Street decreed the fall of the economy. Usually it's the other way around. So the 29 taught us, just like for the tulips, that when people inflate prices on excessive risk and borrowed money and excessive leverage, there is obviously a problem. And then there is a third example. This third example comes from the dot-com bubble, so quite close to us 25 years ago. Now, this is probably the example that most of those influencers or YouTubers use as a reference to talk about the AI bubble, because they reference the technology, they reference the hype around it. And I would say that it's partially true, but partially absolutely false, because on one side, that technology, the internet, promised to change the communications, to deliver an impact on the economy, and to change forever people's life, which indeed it did. However, a lot of AI companies did not work, not because internet, but because of economics. So the dot-com bubble, when it popped, it left as a survivor only those companies whose business models were working. And those were the ones that today we call Mag 7. So we got Amazon, we got Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and so on. Those companies knew how to play in the game. They knew how to make money. At the end of the day, in the stock market, or when we talk about bubbles, we need to refer to a model that produces money. And if it's not producing money, on how sustainable is the borrowing of its money to sustain its entire infrastructure. So the dot-com bubble burst, or the explosion of this bubble, was essentially an inflation of capital put into these ventures, into these companies that did not survive. And it's true that has to do with technology, but it's not true that has to do with AI, because as we will see, AI is a different type of monster. And then obviously we must mention the 2008 housing and financial crisis. Here we are talking about the excess leverage, the subprime mortgages, and the opaque derivatives. And once again, we committed the same mistake of 29. So the banks were lending money to people who did not even have a job. So how can you open a loan without even a job and a source of income? And on top of that, those loans were kind of, today we would say tokenized, but they were securitized, so that people or institutions could invest in the same loans that were already rotten. So this created a widespread system. And since the European banking system was already very fragile, it happened what happened. But once again, there was an irrational wrong mechanism. Now, why we are talking about AI bubble today is because we believe that we are behaving in the same way, but there are fundamental differences. And the first is econometrical. So the economics of AI is not just an investment like it was for the blockchain and the NFTs and the metaverse and so on. That could have been potentially a bubble, I agree. But for the AI, we are talking about a capability that is here to stay, is a capability that is already part of the generation of the GDP. Its investment contributes only to 4% of the GDP, but nearly every single dollar of the American GDP is indirectly generated by AI, whether it's through financial exchanges, whether it's through, I don't know, agricultural companies or corporations or individuals or retailers, everything comes from there. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is that data centers and LLMs, energy-hungry LLMs, they follow how can I say, an increasing demand. So all of those investments poured into data centers, an immense amount of compute, are following the trend of the demand. It's true that population is not increasing as it was before, but population per capita requires higher standard of abundance and comfort. Therefore, with increase of population and with increase of comfort at the same time, which is the basic required by many individuals across the world, the demand is only going to go up. And would be interesting also to see how we can correlate this with the space economy.
Yes, super interesting because this was exactly what I was hinting on also, that companies are now pouring billions of money into AI while bleeding also money for the insane cost of chips, of compute, of data, of energy. And you see like the gap between Europe and, for example, the United States and China is widening so fast. So can you also elaborate a bit on what is happening in this geopolitically view of how we are looking at AI?
That's a very good question, Sandra, and there are many answers to that. So, but I will try to be very, very high level here, but very concise at the same time. A nation is as sovereign as its infrastructural AI infrastructure. Let me translate. If a nation today wants to be sovereign, needs to be AI sovereign or digitally sovereign. The reason why I'm saying this, and this is not a brand, this is not an exaggeration, is AI is now a fundamental capability of states, whether in defense, especially in defense, whether into public administration, government, economy, finance. AI is the capability. We can compare probably in order of magnitude in history, AI just as the invention of the printing machine of Gutenberg. At that level, I think we are talking about that level of impact on the economy and obviously of flow of informations. Now, this is quite important because AI can obviously create huge divides among nations, geopolitically speaking. The first thing to say is that AI is based on cables. So the most fundamental layer of AI is based on cables connecting across the sea, different data centers and servers and data rooms and so on. And as we have seen during the conflicts in the Middle East, some of them have been cut off just as a retaliation measure. And obviously, this is matter of defense more than AI. We are in the full realm of defense and military operations. But even before that, it starts with the actual rare earth. Now, we've been told that those rare earths are so rare. The reality is that we know that are not that rare. So they can be found in South America, in Russia, in Africa for sure, in Congo. And even in the Red Sea, in Saudi Arabia, on the bed of the sea, which is full really of like rare earth used for semiconductors and microchips, AI microchips. And geopolitically speaking, this is an advantage. So having on your own territory already the rare earth means essentially you are sovereign, at least from the supply point of view. So you're already in the early stage of the value chain. And after the rare earth, we move obviously to the processing of semiconductors. Most of it happens in Asia, a little bit in Japan, a little bit in South Korea. So if we can describe two single elements that can power the world are one, sand, because out of sand we can get the silicon. And number two is the polysilicon, which is processed in Germany and then is exported back in Taiwan, where microchips companies like TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor companies, and others are going to produce what are known as the best microchips, and the smallest, of course, at the order of 2 nanometers, sometimes even smaller, that feed into the best GPUs in the world, which are produced back in the US, which is called NVIDIA. And those are possible only through the most advanced machines in the photolithography company, and I think is still from the Netherlands. Yes, ASML. So you guys are quite advanced in that. SML is today the most advanced, produces the most advanced machine, but also the most expensive. I think one machine produced to conduct quantum photolithography for those microchips can cost up to $40 million, one single machine, and the results are incredible. We are in the realm of quantum physics. And only after that, the chips are ready to power NVIDIA GPUs, which go back to data centers assembled in China and then distributed all around the world. Now, you understand how complicated is all of this. And ultimately, there is no clear hedge that a nation can take over the entire value chain. This is the reason why China has been focused only vertically on the rare earth, because it understood that it's a bottleneck. It can represent a bottleneck for the successive stages. But it's also true that AI on a more application level, once you got all the data centers, the compute and the training of the LLMs, you can deploy this technology and those applications for military use, for example, autonomous UAVs or drones that unfortunately cause mass killing, most of the time indiscriminate killings of innocent people in Palestine, in the Middle East, in South America. This is something this is the dark side, the dark unethical aspect of it. But like you said, there is a geopolitical implication, and countries with an edge on AI, especially in defense, are really in control, can detain a military superiority at the moment, because it's just like was the aerial power in the Second World War. Today is AI supremacy.
Yes, because that makes this question also pop up. Like there's this global AI race going on. And to me, it really sounds like Game of Thrones with chips and servers. So what you are explaining here, especially about the governmental and also military progression that is happening, how is this going to affect our daily lives, like our privacy, our safety, our jobs, for example?
This is the most recurring questions across historical phases of humanity from the agricultural revolution. Let me tell you more. So if you think about it, when I think 10,000 years ago, we came up with agriculture. And so we started to accumulate surplus of food to resist to, I don't know, droughts or cataclysms. We kind of replaced the figure or the role of the hunters, right? So if there ever was a corporation hiring hunters, the hunter would have been fired, because now we got agriculture. After agriculture, we moved to the breeding. Around 4,600 BC, we started breeding. And we did not need to rely anymore on, how can I say, on the memory. So there were people memorizing, I don't know, accounting records, or taxes or bureaucracy, or even religious books or stories or myth or whatever. And those people entirely were replaced by clay tablets. The earliest known, I think, is the Code of Hammurabi in modern Iraq and Mesopotamia, and I think Assyrian, Babylonian. I might be wrong here, but that is the area. Then we moved to the invention of Gutenberg press. Now, I want you to focus on this, because here is where jobs transformed. Before Gutenberg, there were the scriba, right? The people dedicating their life to replicate the Bible or other books or other holy scriptures, whatever. Those were full-time employees. Those people were usually paid. But with the invention of Gutenberg press, those people were either repurposed to new roles or kind of trained. Now, the printing itself, obviously, we are happy that there was printing, because that's the reason why we can study or read today. And I think at the time, this debate, the question you asked me, was already there. So, what about my job? If this machine, this evil machine, can replicate our work, hundreds of people working during the night, and does not need to sleep, what is going to happen to me? So this debate was already there. And after that came also the Industrial Revolution. So people working in the farms and producing the real GDP or economical output, so that those machines could actually produce steam and at a strength and at a pace that humans could not outpace. So people objectively feared that their jobs could have been lost. And there are cases even in Great Britain where some workers actually tried and damaged successfully some big machines for producing steel and steam, which doubled, by the way, Britain's GDP in only 50 years. So once again, technology was source of debate between those who said, okay, should we be concerned or this is the future? Obviously, depending on who you were. If you were the capitalist or you were the economist, you would have said, we need machines. If you were the person, you would have said, wait a second, this is going to stop me from feeding my family, to bringing food to my table. And obviously, it did not stop there. It came with the internet. People before were actually in bureaus or in offices were writing manually on documents, writing with big chunk of papers that today would be unimaginable even to store. But then came the computer. So finally, we could store all those files. And those people that were not adapted to the computer, obviously, either got repurposed or they decided to leave. So we expect looking at the pattern of history for AI to behave the same way. Obviously, this is the pattern from the agricultural revolution all the way to AI. And I think here the choice is again between adapting yourself, reskilling, repurposing your job, reposition yourself in the work markets, in the job markets, or kind of being left behind. But that would be your entire choice, because now, alhamdulillah, we are blessed with flows of information. You can study, you can upgrade yourself. And I think, listen, there is definitely, I understand where people are coming from, and everyone, obviously, to be honest, is in the same boats. So we are thinking, is AI going to replace me? There are two things to say here. Number one, if you don't adapt to innovation is going to left you behind. It's kind of trying to stop the water with your hands, the sea with your hands is pointless. So there are two things here to say with regards to AI and the jobs and the concerns regarding the job cuts. Number one is that either you repurpose yourself and obviously you keep up with innovation, or innovation is going to left you behind. And this is what happened across all the history of humanity. It's not just something unfair, source of inequality. It's just about how you approach to challenges. And I think this is not different from any life challenge. Number two, this can also represent, the advent of AI can also represent an opportunity for everyone. Let us not forget that the printing machine, just like the invention of writing or the internet or even the discovery of the fire, powered civilizations, meaning that we use those as a capabilities that powered our evolution. So as agentic items, they are not here to replace us, to replace our life, to replace our capabilities, our intellectual contribution, but they are here to replace the tasks that do not require human intelligence, human capabilities, human creativity. That, yes, and I think that was also the time, because I think we should dedicate and deploy our attention to what really matters and what brings an added value as a humans, regardless what you're doing, whether as a doctor, as a herd, as a worker, as an astronaut, whatever you do, you need to bring your contribution, and that is only possible through the human capabilities. This is the reason why I'm not fully concerned about the job losses, because whoever will kind of be replaced by AI will be in tasks that are fully repetitive and do not require, how can I say, intellectual work, or at least a direct contribution. Now, there is still, obviously, there will still be a loss of job, but the increase of new jobs will be far bigger than the loss. And the people that unfortunately will lose the job, I think, should start to position themselves already to be part of that pool.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say about the replacement, because I hear so many people when they are talking about artificial intelligence, especially when they don't inform themselves with every press release from Silicon Valley, that they are so scared that AI will vanish and wipe out entire sectors. So how realistic is that fear that people have?
I think I think there are, once again, two things to say here. The first one is that there are sectors that require a certain degree of automation and optimization and team expansion, and obviously there is also a work of value realization to see whether AI fits in those organizations. So we always forget that organization always crave for AI transformations, but the reality is that, does AI make sense to organizations? And the first question to ask is exactly that, because there are cases in which AI still does not make sense, but in others, yes, it does. The second thing to say is that people, like I said, need to adapt themselves to the new type of skills and need to develop those skills in the era of AI, because now it's a matter of understanding what AI can bring and what I can bring leveraging AI. Like I always say, AI is never going to replace people, but people using AI are going to replace you. And if you don't leverage that tool, just like the sapiens used the social bonding and the fire as a tool to overcome and to establish their supremacy over the Neanderthals, just like today could happen the same thing. I'm not saying that we're going to fight with claves, hopefully not like the Neanderthals, but the concept, the evolutionary concept is still the same if you think about it. So there is definitely a parallel in all of this, and will be true for AI and for every new disruptive technologies. Maybe in the future will be robotics, will be, I don't know, bioengineering, whatever it's going to be, longevity and so on. So the new skills are for sure going to be something that will help people to drive through this new era. And human creativity is one of them. Creative thinking, like there is a recent research of MIT that studies the brain of people and has discovered, I think, went quite viral also on LinkedIn. And they noticed that the brain of people using ChatGPT on a daily basis is quite less active than those who do not use it. Does not mean that we should not use AI, but I think we should use it consciously. Like if I'm researching on, I don't know, how many days does a tarantula live? That's interesting. Or if I want to fix a problem with my washing machine, right? But if I use it to solve any single problem of my life, that becomes a problem, because in that moment I'm establishing a relationship of dependence over machines, over AI, and that's the famous integration between humans and AI. And that means that that capability becomes part of you, and if I take it out from you, you are really lost. So this is what I mean by saying be ready for the future. That's an example. So and obviously it will be challenging as we approach to the future, but I think it will be quite exciting for all of us.
I think there's a lot of people also very enthusiastic about all of these beautiful developments. So it's kind of hard though to keep up with every new AI tool, with every new model release, with every new update. So if you have a tip for people who are starting, for example, like investigating the world of AI, how can you make sure that you stand out in your own industry, in your own company? How can you be like the expert within a company and be prepared for what is coming?
Well, first of all, be an expert in what you're doing, whether you're a doctor or you're an engineer or you are, I don't know, a pilot of Formula One, whatever is your job. If you fully understand the nature of your business, you understand also what are the limits of human capabilities and where does the border with AI start. So AI, like I said, brings a value, but only if there is a space and there is a need for that value. Sometimes it does not. So how to be the best in your industry means how to solve real problems using AI. It's not just bringing AI for the sake of AI, but one should follow the concept of the so-called business first, right? So you identify what are the problems in your industry, in your daily life. But if you are just entering into this world, just familiarize with the little tools you can find available on Google for free, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's, I don't know, AI voice, whether it's AI presentations. Try to make your life easier with tools that can really save you a lot of time. And you can deploy that time to productive activities that help you to focus, help you to be more creative and to produce more ideas and to deliver faster. AI will be just like that, I think.
Okay, very, very interesting. So the final question I have, and I'm very curious about your answer, is where are we going? Like, what is your prediction for the upcoming months? What do you see will leap? What do you see will like vanish? Or what does work, what doesn't work? And where are we going with this so-called bubble?
Yeah, I think this is a very valid question, and once again, I always refer to history. So I try to be less creative and more observing in this. There is a cycle of hype, just like there was a hype cycle for the internet, the metaverse, the NFT, the blockchain, and so on. I think AI kind of will follow the same pattern. So now we are at the end of at the beginning of the plateau, which means the end of the hype curve, and I think we will slightly go down in terms of attention, meaning that now we will focus on real use cases, and there will be a natural filter of what works and what not. And now everything sounds AI, and everything suscitates attention and triggers the desire to know more and to invest. And billions of dollars in the Silicon Valley are poured just mentioning on pitch decks AI startup. But I think now there is what I call the business Darwinism. Darwinism that levels what works and what not. What works will still go up, and this was the case of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft during the dot-com bubble as an output, and those who will not survive because they never were meant to survive because we're not sustainable business models. And the future that I see is that there will be a slight decrease in the hype, while I see also the contrary, many skeptics start to raise their voice, especially looking in the financial markets. But ultimately, I see that this curve will stabilize and regularize around a nominal value, where we finally consider AI just like the new smartphones. Probably an integration of the two might also be possible. I think there are already some companies working on that. On the very long term, listen, I think, and here we enter more into the realm of philosophy, I think we are driving toward the end of the Homo sapiens. This is not a bad thing. Sounds very scary and sounds very, tragic, but we experience that. We experience that for those who believe that this happened. Obviously, still a theory. When we invented the fire, by inventing the fire or discovering the fire, we did not invent anything. God invented it, but we discovered. So we start cooking food, and eating the cooked food provided us 30% more calories. Those calories powered our brain and fueled the cognitive growth of our brain capabilities. And so we were not those humans anymore. We were new sapiens. And so today could happen the same thing. So there are macro trends that might happen. The first one is obviously AI. We are talking about now. We are already concerned about it, rightfully. The second is going to be robotics. The third is going to be the integration of those two. Once robotics can autonomously work for us, or I imagine even lonely people preferring spending time with the robots other than people. I don't blame them. I would not blame them, but that's a scenario. Bioengineering, which means that people in a good or in a bad way could leverage these technologies. For example, removing, cancers or removing pathologies or deformations. This would be a very wonderful, really wonderful use case. But some people might decide to, in the name of arbitrarily morally decreed precepts, decide to change and to alter their genetical code or the genetical code of their children or people. And then there is obviously the space exploration. So we are heading toward a future where those four main forces are driving us, where, first of all, I don't think in the next 200-300 years we'll still be biologically 100% humans, meaning there will be a part of us. Today, we already have Neuralink, by the way. That sounds very far from us, but in the future, the new generations might be born. This is pretty much where we are heading. So we are going to be an interplanetary or multi-galactic civilization, that's for sure. And I think, and this is my hope, we're going to be probably a more peaceful type of group of humans. We're going to diversify ourselves on different planets. So if one planet explodes, at least we got some others. And we hopefully survive all of this, inshallah.
Well, that was a nice one and a beautiful wish for the future. And I really think it's also good to be optimistic about this, because I hear also a lot of colleagues in my field being very hesitant when it comes to AI. But there are so many opportunities and capabilities also that can help us as a society, as a human species. So thank you so much for answering all of my questions. I'm a bit wiser now. And I will definitely be buying some NVIDIA stocks for my unborn children. So thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me out, Sandra. Thank you. It was a pleasure.